In the heart of Cincinnati's bustling legal district, a story of justice was about to unfold that would capture the nation's attention. Drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from today, as we dive into one of the most compelling courtroom confrontations of our time. The morning sun filtered through the ornate windows of the Hamilton County Courthouse, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Among the crowd of suits and briefcases, Usha Vance moved with quiet determination, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. Few knew that this seasoned attorney was about to step into a case that would shake the foundations of corporate America. Marcus Whitaker, CEO of Prominence Technologies, sat in the witness stand, his expensive suit and carefully manicured appearance a stark contrast to the nervous energy that radiated from him. Across the courtroom, Gloria Chin, a former employee of his company, watched with tired eyes and trembling hands. The discrimination case she had brought against Prominence Technologies had seemed like a losing battle until Usha Vance agreed to represent her. The tension in courtroom 7A was palpable as Usha Vance rose from her chair. The gallery fell silent, watching as she approached the witness stand with measured steps. Even Judge Trevor Harrison leaned forward slightly, his expression betraying his interest in what was about to unfold. "Mr. Whitaker," Usha began, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed courtroom, "you've testified that Prominence Technologies maintains a strict policy against discrimination. Is that correct?" Marcus Whitaker adjusted his tie, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the jury. "Absolutely. We pride ourselves on maintaining an inclusive workplace environment." The corporate defense team, led by Bradford Sterling, sat with smug expressions. They had successfully defended similar cases before, and this one seemed no different. Sterling had even been overheard in the courthouse corridor earlier that morning, questioning why Usha Vance would waste her time on such a hopeless case. But Usha had spent months preparing for this moment. She knew what lay beneath the polished surface of Prominence Technologies' corporate culture. As she began her cross-examination, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted subtly. "Could you explain then, Mr. Whitaker, why your company's internal communication system automatically flags emails containing certain cultural keywords?" Usha's question hung in the air like smoke. Whitaker's confidence wavered for a fraction of a second. "I'm not sure what you're referring to. Let me refresh your memory." Usha nodded to her assistant, Dominic Patel, who distributed documents to the jury. "These are internal memos from your IT department, documenting the implementation of what's called Project Civ. Are you familiar with this initiative?" The color began to drain from Whitaker's face as he scanned the document. In the gallery, several journalists leaned forward, their pens poised above notepads. That's taken out of context," Whitaker stammered, looking to his legal team for support. Bradford Sterling was already on his feet, objecting, but Judge Harrison waved him down. "The context, Mr. Whitaker, is precisely what we're here to establish," Usha continued, her calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the growing discomfort of the witness. "These documents show that employees using cultural terms in their emails were automatically flagged for review by HR, specifically, terms associated with Asian cultural practices and traditions." The jury members exchanged glances as Usha proceeded to lay out a careful pattern of evidence. She revealed how Gloria Chen's emails about Lunar New Year celebrations and traditional family obligations had been flagged, leading to a series of performance reviews that ultimately resulted in her termination. "Is it your testimony that this systematic monitoring of cultural communication had nothing to do with Ms. Chen's dismissal?" Usha's question cut through the pretense like a laser. Whitaker's attempted explanation was interrupted by Usha's next revelation. She introduced emails from other employees who had organized Christmas parties and St. Patrick's Day celebrations without any flags or consequences. The disparity was striking, and the jury's expressions showed they understood the implications. As the cross-examination continued, more details emerged. Usha methodically exposed how Prominence Technologies had created a sophisticated system of cultural suppression while maintaining a facade of inclusivity. She revealed internal communications showing how employees were pressured to Americanize their workplace behavior, while the company publicly celebrated its diversity initiatives. The gallery watched in rapt attention as Usha Vance, with surgical precision, dismantled the carefully constructed image of corporate inclusivity. She didn't raise her voice or engage in theatrical courtroom antics. Instead, her quiet competence and methodical approach made the truth impossible to ignore. Bradford Sterling's objections became increasingly desperate as Usha connected the dots between company policy and discriminatory practice. Each attempt to derail her line of questioning was met with clear, legally sound responses that left Judge Harrison no choice but to allow the examination to continue. By the time Usha reached her final questions, Marcus Whitaker's composed CEO persona had crumbled. His answers became defensive, contradictory, and revealing. The jury watched as he struggled to explain away the mounting evidence of systematic discrimination. "Mr. Whitaker," Usha said, approaching her conclusion, "would you agree that a company's culture is reflected not in its public statements, but in its internal practices?" The CEO's response was barely audible. In the gallery, Gloria Chen wiped away tears as she watched her former employer finally face accountability for the discrimination she had endured. The cross-examination would soon go viral, not for dramatic outbursts or clever wordplay, but for its methodical exposure of corporate discrimination hidden beneath layers of policy and procedure. Usha Vance had demonstrated that justice doesn't always arrive with thunderous declarations. Sometimes it comes through the quiet, persistent pursuit of truth. As the day's session drew to a close, the impact of Usha's cross-examination rippled through the legal community. She had not only exposed discriminatory practices at Prominence Technologies but had also provided a blueprint for identifying similar patterns in other corporations. The case would eventually lead to significant changes in corporate diversity policies across the country, but its immediate effect was visible in the faces of the jury members as they filed out of the courtroom. They had witnessed not just skilled legal advocacy, but a masterclass in speaking truth to power. Have you ever witnessed someone stand up against discrimination in your workplace? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice being served. The story of Usha Vance's cross-examination would be remembered not just for its legal significance, but for the way it demonstrated how systematic discrimination could be hidden in plain sight, masked by corporate policies and procedures. It showed that sometimes the most effective challenges to discrimination come not through loud confrontations, but through careful, methodical exposure of truth. As legal commentators would later note, Usha Vance's approach represented a new model for addressing workplace discrimination, one that focused on exposing the mechanisms of institutional bias rather than just its effects. Her cross-examination of Marcus Whitaker became required viewing in law schools across the country, a testament to the power of preparation, precision, and unwavering pursuit of justice. The case would continue, but that day's cross-examination had already changed the narrative. For Gloria Chen and countless others who had faced similar discrimination, Usha Vance's methodical dismantling of corporate prejudice offered hope that justice was possible even against the most formidable opponents. Remember to like this video and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more stories of courage and justice in our legal system. Your support helps us continue sharing these important narratives that often go untold. The morning after Usha Vance's groundbreaking cross-examination, the Hamilton County Courthouse buzzed with unprecedented energy. News vans lined the street outside, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal sunflowers. Inside, the corridors echoed with whispered conversations about the previous day's revelations. Usha arrived early, her calm exterior masking the weight of what was to come. She knew that Prominence Technologies wouldn't go down without a fight. As she made her way through security, she caught snippets of conversation from passing lawyers and clerks, all discussing her methodical dismantling of Marcus Whitaker's testimony. In the courthouse cafeteria, Bradford Sterling huddled with his legal team, including the recently arrived corporate attorney Wesley Palmer, known in legal circles as the Cleaner, for his ability to sanitize corporate scandals. Their urgent whispers and concerned glances suggested they were preparing something significant. The morning's proceedings began with an unexpected motion from Sterling's team. Judge Harrison's courtroom fell silent as Wesley Palmer rose to address the court. "Your Honor, we move to exclude certain evidence presented during yesterday's cross-examination on the grounds of privileged communication." Usha had anticipated this move. As she stood to respond, she felt Gloria Chen's anxious gaze from behind her. The former employee had received dozens of messages overnight from other Prominence Technologies workers, all sharing similar stories of discrimination. "Your Honor," Usha began, her voice steady and clear, "the defense's motion is not only untimely but represents a deliberate attempt to obscure evidence that was properly obtained through discovery." She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a document that would change the course of the trial. The paper she held was an internal memo from Prominence Technologies' HR department, authored by their former diversity officer, Alexandra Ramirez, who had resigned 6 months earlier. The memo detailed her concerns about the company's discriminatory practices and had been sent to every member of the board of directors. As Usha presented the memo to the court, Bradford Sterling's face tightened. They hadn't known about this document's existence. Alexandra Ramirez had been quietly deposed weeks earlier, her testimony secured before Prominence Technologies could reach her with a settlement offer. The gallery watched in fascination as Usha methodically laid out the connection between Ramirez's memo and the evidence presented during Whitaker's cross-examination. She demonstrated how the company's Project Civ had been implemented despite explicit warnings about its discriminatory nature. "Furthermore, Your Honor," Usha continued, "we have testimony from Melissa Thorne, former head of IT implementation at Prominence Technologies." She gestured to a woman sitting quietly in the gallery, whose presence caused visible discomfort among the defense team. Melissa Thorne had been responsible for coding the algorithm that flagged cultural terms in employee communications. Her conscience had finally compelled her to come forward, bringing with her documentation that showed how the system had been specifically designed to target certain cultural expressions while ignoring others. The morning's proceedings took an even more dramatic turn when Usha called Dr. Vincent Hodges, a renowned expert in corporate culture and discrimination, to the stand. Dr. Hodges had analyzed the patterns in Prominence Technologies' employee evaluations over the past 5 years. "What we see here," Dr. Hodges explained, pointing to a series of charts displayed for the jury, "is a statistically significant correlation between employees' expression of cultural identity and negative performance reviews." His academic tone lent weight to what Gloria Chen and others had experienced personally. During the lunch recess, Usha received word that the case was gaining national attention. The hashtag Usha Vance exposure was trending on social media, with thousands sharing their own experiences of corporate discrimination. The quiet attorney from Cincinnati had struck a nerve that resonated far beyond the courthouse walls. The afternoon session began with Wesley Palmer attempting to discredit Dr. Hodges' testimony. But Usha had prepared for this too. She introduced performance reviews from 20 different employees, all showing the same pattern. Those who maintained strong cultural identities in the workplace faced increased scrutiny and negative evaluations. "Ms. Vance," Judge Harrison interjected, "are you suggesting that Prominence Technologies maintain 2 different standards of evaluation for its employees?" "Not suggesting, Your Honor," Usha replied. "We're proving it." She proceeded to show how the company's performance review system had been deliberately designed to appear objective while incorporating subtle biases against cultural expression. The defense team's strategy began to crumble as Usha called former employee after former employee to testify. Each story built upon the last, creating a damning picture of systematic discrimination hidden behind corporate policies and procedures. Samuel Winters, a former middle manager at Prominence, testified about the pressure he faced to enforce these discriminatory policies. "We were told it was about maintaining a professional atmosphere," he explained, his voice heavy with regret. "But now I see it was about forcing people to suppress their identities." As the afternoon wore on, Bradford Sterling's objections became increasingly desperate. Wesley Palmer sat at the defense table, frantically taking notes and sending messages on his phone. The carefully constructed defense they had planned was being systematically dismantled. During a brief recess, Usha noticed Marcus Whitaker in intense discussion with his board members who had come to observe the proceedings. Their faces showed growing concern as they realized the full implications of what was being revealed in court. The day's most powerful moment came when Usha called Catherine Zhang, a current Prominence Technologies employee who had risked her job to testify. Catherine described how she had been passed over for promotion 3 times despite outstanding performance metrics, each time after organizing cultural events for Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. The message was clear, Catherine testified, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. Success meant leaving your culture at the door. The jury members nodded in understanding, several taking detailed notes. As the day drew to a close, Usha introduced one final piece of evidence, an email chain between Marcus Whitaker and the board of directors discussing the cultural optimization of their workforce. The euphemistic language couldn't hide the discriminatory intent behind their policies. Before Judge Harrison could adjourn for the day, Wesley Palmer approached the bench requesting an emergency conference. The defense team had clearly recognized the devastating impact of the day's testimony and evidence. In the courthouse corridor, Gloria Chin hugged Catherine Zhang, both women crying quietly. Their personal experiences of discrimination had been validated, their courage in coming forward justified. Other Prominence Technologies employees who had come to observe the proceedings gathered around them in support. The media gathered outside the courthouse had swelled throughout the day. As Usha emerged, cameras flashed and reporters called out questions. But she simply smiled and stated, "The evidence speaks for itself. This case is about more than one company or one employee. It's about ensuring that no one has to choose between their cultural identity and their career." Social media exploded with clips from the day's proceedings, particularly the moment when Usha connected the dots between Prominence Technologies' public diversity statements and their private enforcement of cultural suppression. Legal analysts began comparing her methodical approach to historic civil rights cases. Back in her office that evening, Usha reviewed her notes for the next day, knowing that the defense would come back fighting. But she had more evidence to present, more witnesses to call, and more truth to expose. The foundation she had laid over these 2 days would support what was to come. The case was already being called a landmark in employment discrimination law, but Usha knew the real impact would be felt in corporate boardrooms across the country. Companies would have to re-evaluate their policies, looking for the kind of subtle discrimination she had exposed at Prominence Technologies. Have you ever had to choose between your cultural identity and professional advancement? Share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice and accountability in the corporate world. As night fell over Cincinnati, the implications of the day's proceedings continued to ripple outward. Usha Vance had not only advanced her client's case but had also provided a blueprint for identifying and challenging systematic discrimination in the modern workplace. The story was far from over, but something fundamental had shifted. The quiet power of truth, methodically presented and irrefutably documented, had begun to dismantle decades of institutional discrimination disguised as corporate policy. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, justice had taken a significant step forward. The third day of the trial dawned with an unexpected development. As Usha Vance approached the courthouse steps, she noticed an unusual number of Prominence Technologies employees gathered outside. Among them was Derek Patterson, the company's chief technology officer, who had not been scheduled to appear in court. Inside, the tension was electric. Bradford Sterling and Wesley Palmer huddled with their new addition, corporate crisis manager Victoria Schultz, their whispered conversations carrying an edge of desperation. The defense team's strategy was clearly shifting, but Usha had prepared for every contingency. Judge Harrison called the court to order, and immediately, Wesley Palmer was on his feet. "Your Honor, we have new evidence that calls into question the authenticity of certain documents presented by the plaintiff." The gallery stirred, but Usha remained perfectly still, her expression unchanged. What followed was a carefully orchestrated attempt to discredit the technical evidence about Project Civ. Derek Patterson took the stand, presenting himself as the technical authority on the company's communication systems. These algorithms were designed for cybersecurity, he claimed, not for cultural suppression. Usha rose slowly, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the defense's aggressive stance. "Mr. Patterson," she began, "when did you first become aware of Project Civ's implementation?" Her question seemed innocent enough, but those who had followed the case closely noted the subtle trap being laid. Patterson's testimony began to unravel as Usha introduced emails he had exchanged with Marcus Whitaker 2 years earlier. The messages clearly showed that cybersecurity was an afterthought, added to mask the project's true purpose. The CTO's confident demeanor cracked as Usha methodically exposed the contradictions in his statements. But the defense team had another card to play. They called Rachel Winters, the current head of human resources, who presented a new narrative about the company's cultural sensitivity training programs. "We've invested millions in diversity initiatives," she testified, displaying glossy presentations and training materials. Usha's cross-examination of Rachel Winters became the day's turning point. "Ms. Winters," she began, "could you explain why these diversity initiatives were implemented 3 months after Ms. Chen filed her lawsuit?" The question hung in the air like a thundercloud. From her briefcase, Usha produced internal budget reports showing how Prominence Technologies had hastily allocated funds to diversity programs only after becoming aware of the impending legal action. The jury watched intently as she demonstrated how these programs were essentially a corporate facade. During the lunch recess, news broke that several major clients of Prominence Technologies had suspended their contracts pending the trial's outcome. The company's stock price began to fluctuate, and in the courthouse cafeteria, Marcus Whitaker could be seen in intense discussion with his board members. The afternoon session brought testimony from Benjamin Reyes, a former member of the company's IT security team. His revelation about how cultural keywords were weighted differently in the monitoring system directly contradicted Derek Patterson's morning testimony. The defense team's carefully constructed narrative was beginning to collapse. Usha then called Dr. Lydia Blackwood, an expert in corporate cultural psychology, who presented a devastating analysis of Prominence Technologies' internal communications. "What we see here," Dr. Blackwood explained, "is a systematic pattern of cultural suppression disguised as professional standardization." The defense attempted to discredit Dr. Blackwood's testimony, but their efforts fell flat as Usha introduced peer-reviewed studies supporting her experts' conclusions. The jury's expressions showed they understood the significance of this academic validation of Gloria Chen's experiences. A powerful moment came when Usha called Angela Martinez, a current board member of Prominence Technologies who had quietly reached out to her legal team. Despite intense pressure to remain silent, Martinez testified about board discussions where cultural diversity was openly discussed as a challenge to be managed. The gallery watched in stunned silence as Martinez detailed how the board had actively worked to create policies that would pressure employees to conform to a narrow definition of corporate culture. Her testimony carried extra weight coming from someone still within the company's leadership. During the afternoon break, social media exploded with clips of Angela Martinez's testimony. The hashtag corporate cultural suppression began trending, with employees from other companies sharing similar experiences. The case had touched a nerve in the corporate world. Victoria Schultz, the crisis manager, could be seen frantically making calls during every recess. The defense team's body language showed increasing stress as each attempt to control the narrative was systematically dismantled by Usha's methodical presentation of evidence. The day's most dramatic moment came when Usha revealed emails from Marcus Whitaker to the board discussing the financial benefits of cultural homogenization. The messages showed a direct link between the company's discriminatory practices and its profit motives. "Your Honor," Usha addressed the court, "these communications demonstrate that Prominence Technologies didn't just allow discrimination, they monetized it." The statement sent ripples through the courtroom, with several jurors visibly reacting to the implication. As the day progressed, Usha called Nathan Foster, a data analyst who had compiled statistics on promotion patterns within the company. His presentation showed an undeniable correlation between cultural assimilation and career advancement, with those maintaining strong cultural identities consistently passed over for leadership positions. The defense team's cross-examination of Foster became increasingly hostile, but he stood firm, his data painting a clear picture of systematic discrimination. Bradford Sterling's aggressive questioning only served to highlight the company's defensive posture. During the final hour of proceedings, Usha introduced testimony from Isabella Rodriguez, a former executive who had been forced out after refusing to implement discriminatory policies. Her emotional account of being told to choose between her culture and her career resonated deeply with the jury. The day concluded with an unexpected request from the defense team for a settlement conference. Judge Harrison scheduled it for the following morning, but Usha knew that any settlement would need to address not just compensation, but systematic change within the company. In the courthouse corridor, Gloria Chen was surrounded by current and former Prominence Technologies employees, all sharing similar stories of discrimination. The case had become a rallying point for corporate cultural reform across the country. As reporters gathered outside, Usha made a brief statement. This case is revealing how discrimination has evolved in the corporate world. It's no longer about explicit bias, but about subtle systems that pressure people to erase their cultural identities. That evening, legal experts on national news programs discussed the implications of the case. Many predicted it would lead to a fundamental reevaluation of corporate diversity policies nationwide. The term cultural compliance entered the public discourse as a new form of workplace discrimination. Have you ever felt pressured to downplay your cultural identity at work? Share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more coverage of this groundbreaking case. Back in her office, Usha prepared for the settlement conference, knowing that any agreement would need to include substantial corporate policy changes. The case had grown beyond a single plaintiff's grievance to become a catalyst for national reform. The evidence presented over these 3 days had exposed not just one company's discriminatory practices, but a broader pattern of corporate cultural suppression. Usha Vance had demonstrated how modern discrimination often hides behind seemingly neutral policies and procedures. As night fell over Cincinnati, news channels continued to analyze the day's revelations. The case had sparked a national conversation about authentic inclusion versus performative diversity in corporate America. Tomorrow's settlement conference would determine not just Gloria Chen's future, but potentially the future of workplace cultural expression across the country. The quiet power of methodical legal work had accomplished what years of diversity initiatives had failed to achieve. It had exposed the machinery of institutional discrimination and forced corporate America to confront its biases. The story of Usha Vance's systematic dismantling of corporate discrimination would be studied in law schools for years to come. The morning of the settlement conference arrived with an atmosphere of anticipation. News helicopters circled the Hamilton County Courthouse as Usha Vance made her way through a crowd of supporters. Among them were employees from dozens of major corporations, all carrying signs supporting cultural diversity in the workplace. Inside Judge Harrison's chambers, the tension was palpable. Marcus Whitaker sat with his legal team, his usual confidence replaced by resignation. Bradford Sterling and Wesley Palmer flanked him, while Victoria Schultz studied data on her tablet, her expression grim. The company's stock had dropped 15% since the trial began. Usha entered with Gloria Chen and a small team of legal experts, including civil rights attorney Raymond Martinez, who had joined the case as co-counsel. Before them lay not just the possibility of monetary compensation, but the opportunity to reshape corporate culture across America. Before we begin, Usha addressed the room. I want to be clear about our requirements. She produced a document that would become known as the Cultural Integrity Protocol, a comprehensive framework for protecting cultural expression in the workplace. The defense team's eyes widened as they reviewed the document. The protocol went far beyond standard diversity initiatives, requiring fundamental changes in corporate policy, monitoring systems, and evaluation criteria. It would transform how Prominence Technologies and potentially other corporations approached cultural diversity. This is unprecedented, Wesley Palmer protested, but his objection lacked conviction. The evidence Usha had presented over the past 3 days had left the company with little room to maneuver. As the negotiations proceeded, news leaked that several major shareholders of Prominence Technologies had called for Marcus Whitaker's resignation. The board was facing intense pressure to demonstrate meaningful change, not just financial settlement. Outside the chambers, Melissa Thorne, the former IT implementation head, had organized a gathering of current and former employees. They shared stories of cultural suppression, creating a powerful testimony to the importance of the case's outcome. The settlement conference took an unexpected turn when Angela Martinez, The board member who had testified earlier arrived with additional documentation. The papers revealed that Project Civ had been implemented at several of Prominence Technologies' subsidiary companies, expanding the scope of the case dramatically. Usha seized this moment to introduce another key element of the protocol, an independent cultural diversity audit committee. This body would have the power to review corporate policies and practices, ensuring genuine inclusion rather than superficial compliance. Your company has a choice, Usha stated calmly. You can fight these changes and face similar lawsuits across your subsidiaries, or you can become a leader in authentic cultural inclusion. Her words carried the weight of inevitability. During a brief recess, Dr. Lydia Blackwood presented research showing how companies with genuine cultural diversity outperform those with homogeneous corporate cultures. The economic argument for change was becoming as compelling as the moral one. The breakthrough came when Catherine Zhang, still employed at Prominence Technologies, brought forward a group of middle managers who had been secretly documenting discriminatory practices. Their testimony had been held in reserve, a final card in Usha's carefully played hand. Marcus Whitaker, seeing the walls close in, finally spoke directly to Gloria Chen. "I never intended," he began, but Chen interrupted him with quiet dignity. "Intent doesn't erase impact, Mr. Whitaker. But change can begin with acknowledgement." As the afternoon progressed, the settlement took shape. It included not just substantial compensation for Gloria Chen and other affected employees, but sweeping reforms that would transform Prominence Technologies' corporate culture. The Cultural Integrity Protocol would require the company to dismantle Project Civ and similar monitoring systems, establish protected channels for reporting cultural discrimination, create promotion criteria that explicitly valued cultural diversity, implement mandatory training on cultural intelligence for leadership, form an independent oversight committee with real enforcement power. But Usha wasn't finished. She introduced a requirement that Prominence Technologies share their data and experiences with other corporations, turning their transformation into a case study for corporate America. Victoria Schultz, initially hired to minimize damage, found herself taking notes on how to implement these changes. The crisis manager had become an agent of transformation. Outside the chambers, the crowd had grown. Employees from tech companies across the country had gathered, many sharing their own stories on social media. The case had become a movement for corporate cultural reform. Judge Harrison, reviewing the final settlement terms, noted that this agreement would likely become a template for future discrimination cases. "Ms. Vance," he observed, "you've created something unprecedented here." As news of the settlement spread, Prominence Technologies' stock began to stabilize. Market analysts noted that investors were responding positively to the company's commitment to genuine reform. The final agreement was announced late in the afternoon. Marcus Whitaker, standing before the press, acknowledged the company's failures and committed to becoming a leader in cultural inclusion. His words, carefully crafted by Victoria Schultz, marked a public turning point in corporate America's approach to diversity. Gloria Chen, surrounded by supporters, made a brief statement. This was never about money. It was about dignity, about the right to be fully ourselves in the workplace. Her words would be quoted in business schools and corporate training programs for years to come. The settlement's impact rippled through the corporate world immediately. Several major companies announced reviews of their own cultural policies. The term Vance Protocol entered the business lexicon, shorthand for comprehensive cultural inclusion standards. In the days that followed, Usha Vance received thousands of messages from employees facing similar discrimination. Law firms across the country began developing expertise in cultural discrimination cases, using her methodical approach as a model. The case's influence extended beyond legal circles. Corporate consultants started offering cultural integrity audits. HR departments rushed to review their policies. The business press ran features on companies with successful multicultural environments. 1 month after the settlement, Prominence Technologies held its first Cultural Diversity Summit, with Gloria Chen as the keynote speaker. The event was attended by executives from across the industry, eager to learn from the company's transformation. The case became required reading in law schools and business programs. Students studied how Usha Vance had exposed systematic discrimination not through dramatic confrontations, but through careful accumulation of evidence and logical argumentation. Have you seen changes in how your workplace handles cultural diversity? Share your observations in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about positive transformations in corporate America. 6 months later, Prominence Technologies reported increased employee satisfaction and improved innovation metrics. Their stock price had recovered and surpassed its previous levels, demonstrating that cultural inclusion could drive business success. The legacy of Usha Vance's case extended far beyond one company or industry. It had exposed how modern discrimination often hides behind systems and policies, and provided a framework for identifying and addressing these subtle forms of bias. As corporate America grappled with changing demographics and global markets, the Vance Protocol became a standard for measuring genuine commitment to cultural inclusion. The quiet attorney from Cincinnati had changed not just laws, but attitudes. The final chapter of this story wasn't written in the courthouse or corporate boardrooms, but in the daily experiences of employees who could now bring their full cultural identities to work. The true measure of success was in the stories that would never need to be told in court. Remember to like and share this video to spread awareness about the importance of cultural inclusion in the workplace. Together, we can continue the work of making every workplace truly welcoming for all. The case of Usha Vance versus Prominence Technologies showed that real change doesn't always come through dramatic confrontations, but through the patient, persistent exposure of truth. It demonstrated that justice, like cultural transformation, requires both courage and competence. In the end, this wasn't just a legal victory, it was a blueprint for change. Usha Vance had shown how the law could be used not just to punish discrimination, but to create positive transformation. Her methodical approach had turned a single case into a movement for corporate cultural reform.